Good morning and welcome to Love Every Moment, coming to you today from the Black Hills of South Dakota. Today's verse is 1 Corinthians 13:5, and I'll start with the word love. Does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered. Well, in last week's verse, and I have the link right up here, we started off with a series of descriptions of what love is or what love is not. Interestingly, Jesus doesn't say just what love is. He also says this is what love is not. And today's list is all negative. So in other words, all things that love is not. Now back in yesterday's verse, or last week's verse, we had the first two, love is patient and love is kind. Now today's verses are actually related to those two negatively. So let me show you what I mean. Where it says love is kind in verse 4, notice the first two in today's verse, love does not act unbecomingly. Well, acting unbecomingly is not kindness. And the next one says love does not seek its own. Well, that's also not being kind. Then back to verse 4, it says love is patient. Well, these next two have to do with that. Love is not easily provoked, and that's dealing with patience. And love does not take into account a wrong suffered. Again, that's dealing with patience. So this is expounding on patience, not only what patience and kindness is, but now what it is not. Now let's actually hit the list. The first one says love does not act unbecomingly. That's an interesting word. It's only used one other time in Scripture, and that's in an interesting verse where it says if a man is acting unbecomingly towards his virgin daughter, let her marry. So the way I'm going to look at this is there are certain cultural norms. They may make sense, they may not make sense, but they're cultural norms in different cultures. And a Christian is not going to contradict those to the point where people are uncomfortable around them. Here's an example. In our culture, can a man kiss his wife in public? Well, sure. But there's kissing and then there's kissing. And if it's just a peck on the cheek, no one's going to be offended. But if they start slogging it and so forth, people are going to get very uncomfortable, and that's acting unbecomingly. Right now there's a controversy about wearing masks. And in certain buildings, maybe it might make someone uncomfortable if we don't wear a mask. Sure, we may have the right not to, or we may have reasons not to, but a Christian does not act unbecomingly because we're practicing kindness and putting other people's feelings in front of ours. The next one says it does not seek its own. Well, this is pretty plain. In fact, this is probably the biggest one, in that any love that is self-seeking is definitely not God's love. That's simply self-love. It has no part in God's kingdom. The next one says love is not provoked. Now there's a lot of provocative stuff out there, especially on the internet, but just about everywhere. And sometimes we may hear someone railing against Christianity. Oh, you Christians are a bunch of idiots and the Bible is nothing but a fairy tale. And a Christian can listen to that and not be upset, not be provoked, not fly off the handle easily and get into an argument. We shouldn't be argumentative people. Unfortunately, I see us turning into that. There's no reason for that when love is ruling. There's a book I recommended earlier that I might recommend again called Unoffendable. It's well worth a read. You may want to check it out and see how that applies to love. The last one says love does not take into account a wrong suffered. This is about forgiveness, and forgiveness is part of patience, because remember, patience is suffering long. So we don't keep a list of, well, you offended me back in 1979. That's not really forgiveness if we're keeping a list of it. So there shouldn't be any bringing up of the past and so forth. It should be water under the bridge, and we should just go on loving that person that might have offended us before. This is what love should be if it's God's love. So let's love every moment, because then we're going to love every moment. I'm your average wretch, and I hope you have a great week.